God floods the earth, sparing Noah, his family, and 2 of every animal on board his ark.
Now, an international team of researchers have found new evidence that a famous formation in Turkey could be the site of the ancient vessel.
What if a picture taken from a NATO pilot's plane showed a huge scar in the shape of a boat high up in a mountain in Turkey, far from any water? No one could agree on whether it was just a trick of the rocks for decades.
Hang on, because researchers in Turkey now claim they found indisputable evidence that the story of Noah's Ark was not a cautionary tale about the consequences of forsaking God, but a verifiable historical event.
Until scanners started finding layers of dirt that looked like decks. Could the Ark be hidden in this ridge? Don't click away yet, because we're about to go inside the mountain and find out what's really there. The photograph that wouldn't die. Start with a map that doesn't have much on it. Eastern Turkey, high ground, ridges that fold like waves that have been frozen in stone. The hills have been shaken, and the slopes have been peeled back for a few years now. In 1949, a Turkish army plane flew over this damaged country as part of a normal NATO mapping mission. From inside the plane, all you can see is rock, snow, and dark. After that, his camera picks up a shape that doesn't fit. Not a circle. There is no crack. A long, narrow shape that looks like the shape of a ship. The film dries. The picture comes to life. People start to think of the quiet mountain as the spot where a question showed up. It's a few miles south of Mount Ararat, which people who live near the Big Cone call Arada. The Bible talks about the mountains of Ararat, and this is right nearby. There isn't much air around, and the ground looks like it could hide anything. The rock formation is now called the Durupinar Formation. The ground is sloped so that rain and melting snow run off into ditches and fans. It's not on the peak itself, which is important because weather and gravity have shaped this land very clearly. Still, this line in the rock looks different. It's very long. It's not very wide. One end is pointed like a prow. As you look down at it from above, your brain would say 3 words. That's a boat. Newspapers pick up the picture. A single frame turns into a wave that goes through languages and countries. Some people see the frame as proof. For some, it's just erosion at work. There are more and more arguments. Crews walk in. The skin of the hill gets scratched up in places. Pictures are taken from the ground up. There are claims, answer to counterclaims. People with hope, worry, and long road trips are drawn to the formation. The shape stays the same through it all. Winters take a bite. Summers dry it out. Even though the form drains, shrinks, and settles, the silhouette always looks like something else. Take a look at the body to understand why that sketch works on people. It's stretched out like a big melon, but the sides are straighter. It looks like a bow sticking out of the water because the narrow end bends up a bit. The edges aren't as smooth as you might think for a simple mud fan, and the bump along the edge can sometimes make it look like a hull stiffener. Nature can lie about geometry. The layers in a mud flow can be stacked and then broken up into clean lines. Slides can break up rocks into pieces that look like plates and ribs. But from nose to tail, this whole thing has a single form that can be read. That's why the picture keeps coming up when people talk about Ararat. It is the quick yes that your brain gives you before it asks you a hard question. The 20th century brought a lot of people. Some of them are adventurers looking for a myth. Some of them are researchers using the tools they have to test a claim. There are a few trenches dug, but not as many as in a full modern dig with limits and open data. Heavy stones with holes in them also get a lot of attention in this area. They are straight up and have a big hole near one end, making them look like big earrings. One group calls them drogue stones, which are like sea props that a big boat could drag to keep its keel steady in rough water. Another group says that these stones are devotional or Byzantine, and that they have later carvings on some of their faces. They also say that they have been found in towns and fields, not in a sealed ship. The argument shows why the situation is more important than any one thing. A stone that doesn't have a date or a layer is like a story that doesn't have an end. So why wouldn't Durupinar leave when so many other pictures of the Ark disappeared? It's there, because it's where symbol and land meet. In Genesis, a boat is parked in the mountains of Ararat. From above, the mountains look like the shape of a boat. The place is very dramatic. A child could easily draw the line with their finger. In a moment, their minds link them. But for decades, the tools were what made people want to do it. People argued about forms and how they felt. Ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity, which don't go through the ground, were either not possible or not used very much on that hill. There was mostly talk, travel, and a few small cuts in the ground. Things changed. Tech caught up. A new team with a clear plan took to the slope in the year 1999, the Noah's Ark. Scans group, led by Andrew Jones, did not come to follow a story. They came to see if a pattern worked. The ground should behave differently below the hull shape if it hides a real structure, not on top, where wind and rain can trick you, but below, where rocks and dirt are honest. Geophysics today lets us send signals into the ground and listen for the echoes. Radar can bounce and map changes that happen quickly. The resistance of a substance can show where it stops or conducts electricity. Soil labs can look at what's inside a form and compare it to what's far away and outside. Those tests might be able to find it if there are layers in the right spots, clean lines where walls and floors would meet, or chemistry that looks like wood and pitch that has been decaying for a long time. Those tests should also show that the formation is just rock that has been pushed and raked by water and force. Do not look up. Keep your eyes on the ground. Everyone took a look at the picture. The rocks below will tell us if this ridge is smart geology or hidden carpentry. Now get closer, because the next part opens the hull and goes through the signals line by line to find out what the Earth says is inside, what the scans see. Think of the slope as a book that can't be opened. The scanners are a safe way to read it without damaging the pages. Ground-penetrating radar drops radio waves into the ground and listens for echoes when the signal hits a sudden change, like when it goes from loose soil to packed soil or from rock to rock. Electrical resistivity sends a small current between probes and makes a picture of the ground's resistance or conductivity. For example, dry rock resists, while damp finds conduct. Buried timbers and holes can stand out. Both ways don't damage anything. There's no need to make holes or move artifacts. Just let physics return patterns that hint at edges, layers, and empty places. Planned poles are life or death. A grid of lines is used to make sure that the same spot is crossed more than once. So that shallow and deep signals don't blend together, depth windows are set in small steps. To improve the picture, areas of high interest are given less space between them. A neat sketch can be made by anyone, so raw sections are important. The real test is whether the original radargrams and resistivity slices show the same breaks and shapes when they are run by another analysis. A cool picture can be turned into reliable data with clear coordinates, lines that are see-through, and saved instrument settings. From the scans, the team can see that inside the boat-shaped image, there is a pattern that keeps coming back. The first part is a stack of 3 wide bands that run along most of the length. Even though they're not perfect, the pancakes stay together better inside the line than outside it. That repeated space is known as decks on the team. There is a long, thin stripe that goes from the top to the bottom of the band, like a hallway. It sticks to the center line and stays on course even when the slope changes, which doesn't happen very often when all you have are random rocks. Longer cross lines that start at about 90 degrees spread out along that stripe. They show up at regular times that make it look like walls. That sounds like rooms that open off a central hallway in ship language. Depth is another clue. The best traits are visible from a few feet up to about 30 feet, after which they become less clear. That makes sense for a body that was covered by slope wash and then became stable over time. It also makes it more likely that pockets will never be fully filled. In the data, those show up as low-density patches or spots with a high resistance. There might be small holes there where beams used to be. They could also be places where rocks have broken, animal caves, or dried lenses in the colluvium. A void is just a blank without a careful trench or core. The tests on the dirt touch a different nerve. The amount of organic matter found in samples taken inside the shape is about 3 times that found just outside the edge. Potassium is also marked, and it often goes with plants and some pitches. After many years, wood breaks down, but it leaves behind a chemical trail. The amount of biological matter can go up if there is lignin, resins, or tiny pieces. Pitch can get stuck on grains and leak into holes. If a big piece of wood sat here and rotted, the dirt should remember. At least that story makes sense with that big of a bump. But science needs strict rules to be useful. This shows who touched which bag from the hillside to the lab bench. The methods explain how the item was burned, washed, or measured in the lab. What normal looks like in the same rocks and weather is shown by controls that are far from the mound, filling in blanks and making copies to catch mistakes or careless work. There are interesting things about more organics inside. But it's hard to ignore the signal when it says more organics inside under strict methods and multiple labs, with biomarker profiles that point to wood or pitch. Now, zoom out and ask yourself how these forms match the oldest plan we have. The Bible talks about 3 decks. Based on the scans, there are 3 different areas. Genesis talks about a long center area with lots of room for animals. The data show a long tunnel with right-angled branches. People are excited because the map below the ground works like a simple floor plan. Radargrams are still very good at fooling the eye. Our brains make straight lines out of smudged-up images. Beds can be stacked in ways that make them look like floors. Differences in resistivity can make smooth changes stand out. It's not a signed confession. The match is just a hint. People who are skeptical give a clear counterstory. Sediments that are pushed together can fold into a syncline, which has stacked layers and straight edges. Slide tongues can split into long sheets that look like they were built when they were only torn and packed together. Over time, erosion will favor straight breaks that run with the grain. This will create fake walls that look normal at survey spacing. Rock that has been worn down by time, root runs and dry pockets, all naturally makes cavities. To feel more sure of yourself, add more instruments and get right to the point. Microtremor and MASW are 2 different ways to map differences in stiffness that can help you tell the difference between rock cloth and built layers. After that, dig a trench between the largest corridor and the sharpest wall. When joinery, fasteners, or fitting timbers are added, mathematics changes into carpentry in a single frame. Based on the scans and soils alone, what's inside? In a broad sense, the ground around Durupinar doesn't behave the same way as the ground inside its shape. They form consistent bands, have a long axial feature with right-angled breaks, and carry higher organic signals that sound like dried wood and pitch. All of that fits with a body that was built. None of it is diagnostic on its own. The designs could also come from layered slope deposits and natural cracks that were made sharper by the choices made during processing. Instead of wood, the chemicals could come from old plant mats and runoff traps. The empty spaces might be drying tricks instead of rooms. What shapes are hidden? Is that the new question? What about does the size really fit the spec? If this is a hull, its length should not flinch when we look at old math. That means we need to talk about cubits, inches, and how an Egyptian ruler can change the whole story. Let's measure the shadow. Does the length fit the Bible? When you open the old plan, the first number that stands out is 300 cubits long. It sounds easy until you ask the important question, what is a cubit? Different countries use different measurements for a cubit, which is the distance from the elbow to the tip of the finger. The standard cubit is about 18 inches long, so 300 cubits is about 450 feet. A Royal Egyptian cubit is about 26 inches long, so 300 cubits is about 516 feet long. There is one line in the text, two tools on the table, and two answers that both say they are right. This is the reason why the field numbers at Durupinar move around. People have given lengths of about 430 feet, 450 feet, and a little more than 500 feet over the years. It's possible that they're not telling the truth. They're just measuring things in different ways. One group could follow the inner edge of the shape, while the other could go along the outer edge. There are different ways to fix the slope. One surveyor might put a tape measure along the ground and add extra feet for every dip and bump. It's very important to choose the right start and end points because erosion can wear them away. It's possible for dozens of feet to change the end number just by choosing to measure in a straight line or along a curved surface. For this site to claim a clean match in the year 25, the measurement needs to be up-to-date and dull in the best way possible. Use drone photogrammetry or LiDAR to make a map of the whole feature that includes every rock and edge. Before anyone touches a ruler, lock the ends. Then make the coordinates public so that anyone can check them. Give both a straight baseline and a surface-following path version of the length, along with error bars for each. Size talk gets real when different teams can press the same data and land in the same small spot. Size talk doesn't mean anything if the numbers keep moving around. The cubit game also needs you to be honest about the background. Genesis talks about how long a ship is in cubits. But what kind of cubit did the author and readers have in mind? A standard cubit, which is about 18 inches long, was used in many places and at many times. The Egyptian royal cubit, which is about 26 inches long, was used in Old Kingdom buildings and in later texts and tools. A goal of 500 feet or more isn't too far away if the longer ruler is used. If the shorter ruler is used, the target is more like 450 feet. Supporters can say, "See, it fits," because Durupinar's reported lengths fall in that range, while skeptics say, "It fits anything if the ruler keeps changing." Let's not wave around rulers anymore. Instead, let's share methods, like exactly where the ends were put, what corrections were made, and how uncertainties were calculated. This part also has material talk because the length without the hull is only half a ship. Long debates have been going on about the text's gopher wood. People have read the Hebrew letters Gimel, Peh, and Resh as a type of wood, as treated or laminated wood, and even as reeds bundled together, like the papyrus craft that was used on old rivers. The build material changes what you'd expect the ground to remember, no matter how it's fixed. It's possible for big trees to leave behind stronger void patterns, more straight lines, and a heavier lignin signature in the soil. Packs of reeds that are sealed with pitch might leave behind shorter lines, more biomarkers made of resin, and a different decay footprint. In order to connect a measured length to a real type of hull that could last long enough to be buried and still talk to us today through chemistry and math, it is important. The same goes for Durupinar and 300 cubits. The honest answer is that both sides can make a case, which is the point. A shape of about 400 feet should work with one ruler, while a shape of more than 500 feet should work with another. Modern surveying makes it possible to fix the length so precisely that the which cubit argument is no longer about a moving target, but about a clear, published choice. Size doesn't prove anything until that happens, It just gives a hint about what might have gone through the door. This is where the number game meets the story of people. Cubits were not created in a vacuum. They came from real arms and real ways of building. Also, flood stories didn't just come out of nowhere. They came from real water, real disasters, and feelings that wouldn't go away. Inches won't be enough to answer the next question about the shape of this mountain. Why do so many cultures remember a flood? Is there a big enough geological event in this area to keep that memory alive for thousands of years? Before we go after wood and pitch again, we need to turn the page and follow the water. Flood memories and megafloods. Before the Ark was a ship, there was a story. This story is older than most people think. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, a man named Utnapishtim is told that the world will end in a flood. He makes a boat, gathers animals, rides out the chaos, and ends up on a mountain that is sometimes called Nisir or Mashu. If you change the names, you can already see the pattern. Alert, ship, animals, mountain, life. It's not homework to copy the Bible. It's proof that the flood template lived in the area long before other texts were written. Thoughts move around like rivers. They split up and then come back together, carrying parts of older stories into new languages and ideas. Fast forward to an office in London in the 1980s. A small clay tablet from a family collection shows up. The tiny cuneiform wedges are read by a librarian, who finds another flood story hidden in the lines. The time and place are more important than the length. Sumerians wrote about floods a very long time ago, which means that people who lived near those rivers already had memories of water that went crazy. That's important here because it shows that the idea of the flood didn't have to wait for missionaries or map makers to come along later. It was already a part of the culture of the Near East. Now move the camera away from the books and toward the scenery. In the 1990s, geologists pushed a big idea. The Black Sea wasn't always like it is now. They said that around 8,000 years ago, rising water from the Mediterranean broke through the Bosporus and rushed into a lower area that was mostly made up of fresh water. Cores taken from the bottom told a clear, sharp story. Life from fresh water below and life from salt water above, as if a switch was flipped. Other signs showed that the shoreline was changing quickly and that river areas were being flooded. The pictures in the headlines got more dramatic, with claims of flow rates on the scale of Niagara Falls and coast jumps of miles per day. There is no doubt that the main point is made. A sudden breach can damage coastlines, flood farms, and force families to move quickly, explaining to their children why the water is now over their old house. When you put all the pieces together, you can see how big events turn into big stories. A regional megaflood doesn't show that the wooden ark ever sat on a ridge, but it does explain why flood stories are common. People in your town will never forget the time when a lake turned into a rural sea. Prayers, poems, and place names are how you carve the memory into your life. You give it to someone else. After that, writers will be able to shape that memory into a clearer arc, vessel, animals, mountain, because the pattern's bones are already known. Why does this fit in a Durupinar script? Because it makes the temperature go down. Folk tales about floods don't always say, "case closed." Huge floods happen, and people remember, they say. Based on the stories from Mesopotamia, the pattern is older than the Hebrew text. Geology shows that the area had the right kind of shock. In Turkey, a boat form on a hillside hits so hard because of these two things. It connects directly to a system that has been working for thousands of years. The bar needs to be raised now. What does strong proof look like in this case? And how do you get it without lying to yourself? Now, turn the page because the next part sets the bar for proof. How to dig, sample, and publish so that, finally, the mountain and the measuring stick match up. What would actually demonstrate an arc? Don't just show pretty pictures if you want everyone to think that a hull is buried under that ridge. Give them everything. You need to have raw radargrams, full ERT sections, velocity models, survey grids, GPS points, and the exact settings for the instruments. Different teams should get the files, handle them, and check to see if the same lines show up. Labels like corridor, wall, and deck are not facts. They're just guesses that need to pass a random review. The claim is stronger if a new researcher with the same data draws the same shapes without being told what to look for. The next step is quick but careful ground truthing. Dig a hole where the sounds are strongest. There is more than one way to cross the central corridor. Cut through the right-angle reflection that is the best. Don't change the levels, just record them as they are. Take pictures of every inch. You will see cuts, joins, and sides that don't move around like broken mud if it's building something. The beds and cracks will tell you if it's rock. Cores are also helpful, but they need to be organized so that they are close to the edges of any slopes and inside the shape. To find out if a space is natural cracking or a made room, more than one tool must confirm it. Then, the space must be safely entered or cast. They have a voice that can't be faked. Thin slices of wood can show cell structure, and maybe even species if the wood survives. If you see joinery, look for pegs, lash points, mortise and tenon holes, or dowel scars. Anything that says organized shipbuilding should be there. Run chemistry if the itch is still there. Biomarkers can connect a residue to pine resin, birch tar, or another old filler used for sealing. The situation is more important than the date. Both dendrochronology and radiocarbon should be able to find wood that is still in place in the right way. OSL can help with filling in with sand. No matter how old they are, scraps from upslope that have been worked on don't count. There needs to be more organic matter in the soil. Use methods that get to the heart of what organic really means. A LOI can show the total amount of organic matter, but a GC-MS can look for resin signatures and lignin pieces. An ICP-MS can show the location of potassium and trace elements. You can run off-site controls, copies, and blanks, then make heat maps. A pattern is important if the strongest signals fall neatly inside the outline and then drop off beyond it. The Earth starts to tell a clear story instead of a vague one if the bump stays in place under strict conditions and shows biomarkers of wood or pitch. Without a story, artifacts are just cool rocks. If you're arguing about drogue or anchor stones, connect them to a layer with material that can be used to date them. Do not pick one out of the field and take ship gear. Write down where it sits, what's above and below it, and whether there are any later carvings or crosses that show it was used before. Each thing needs to be locked in a schedule that can be checked by someone who doesn't care about the news. Everything needs to get off the mountain and live in the light. Register your plan to dig ahead of time. In peer-reviewed journals, you should include the full files with your work. Put copies in open repositories so that a high school team can get them and use them to learn. Set up separate rooms so that the results don't depend on just one building. The bar is low. A suspect should be able to check the chain from the trench to the end without being able to see your email. If this gripped you, hit like, share it with a friend, and subscribe for the next reveal. Don't stop here. Click the next video popping up on your screen and keep the journey going with us.